possibly still celebrating the holiday today. We have a couple on vacation, and I will turn it over to Elise.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Making sure you can see my full screen. Does that look good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I am so excited about this class. As Janet alluded to last week, this is one of my favorite topics. I do a lot of coaching on this. I know Janet does as well. But maybe it's because it begs this big question, which is what makes someone a leader? Have you ever wondered that about yourself? Like, how did I end up in this position? I think a lot of us sort of fall into leadership or back into it, or all of a sudden, we're very, very good at what we do. We're a master craftsman at our skill. And then all of a sudden we inherit this team of people. And then we're like, what do I do now? What makes a great leader is a good question to ask, to try to dig a little bit deeper to see, do I have what it takes to be a great leader, which of course is what this class is all about. But I think it's important for us to understand that it takes more than just skill. It takes more than just knowledge and expertise. You might have great skills, but are you seen as a true authority in your subject field? You might have really good ideas, but can you present them with confidence and be able to really influence and persuade a room to agree with and support your ideas? You might be very analytical and really reasoned and have good judgment about the things that you think about, but can you make the really difficult decisions, the toughest calls of leadership, and see them through to the end? You may have a title, but do you have vision? So there's all these things we could see that, hey, I might think I have some of these building blocks to be a leader, but do I really carry it off in a way that says to others, he or she, they've got that it factor. They've got something special about them that makes me want to follow them. And I think that's what we all wrestle with is I want that quality, that presence that says that I am truly leadership material and people are willing to follow me. The essence of executive presence is what we're going to get into today to try to help you break it down a little bit more into some specifics. One of the things that we're going to get into that I'm really excited about is I'm going to share with you some findings of a study. I don't know about you, but anytime anybody can put some data behind it, it makes it a little bit more believable to me, and I can follow it a little bit more and then really wrestle with how I feel about the data. But this study is a really great one. It's a study done by the Center for Talent Innovation. It was done in early 2012. It was a survey of 4,000 professionals across all different industries and different walks of life, but they were all in leadership. And it posed that really important question, which is, what is executive presence? What makes a great leader? I've got a couple of books I want to recommend to you just early on here to give you kind of a sense of it. The study I'm going to share with you, and I'll go into detail in the study. There is a download in the Dropbox that is an executive summary of the study, but that study also produced a book. I don't know if you all can see that. The book is titled Executive Presence, and it's written by a woman named Sylvia Ann Hewlett. This is really sort of the deep dive into the study, and the subtitle of the book is called The Missing Link Between Merit and Success, which I think is a really good one. This is a book that I just finished reading. I don't know if you can see that one. It's called Own the Room. This is another excellent read, Own the Room. It's written by a couple of authors, and it's through the Harvard Business Review Press, but it's how to discover your signature voice to master your leadership presence. I really like a lot of their content there. And this is another book that Janet and I really, really love. We've talked about this quite a bit. It's called The Charisma Myth. Isn't that an interesting title? The Charisma Myth, How Anyone Can Master the Art and Science of Personal Magnetism. The Charisma Myth. This is a great book as well. So there's so many good resources if you want to take a deeper dive. I just wanted to share some of those books with you. I also wanted to share this chart. So this might be a slide you just take a screenshot of. I don't have this for you in the Dropbox, but what I do have in the Dropbox is an assessment that goes along with this graphic. So here in this graphic, you see that Janet and I believe there are 6 elements that go into executive presence. Each one of them plays into creating and portraying who you are as a leader. And some of these you're going to recognize because you've heard us talk about being centered, having composure, having class. Yes?
I'm getting a couple notes here that the slides are not aligning with what you're saying.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let me go back. Hold on a second. Let me go back. Can you see this slide? This is,
I see the circle chart. Like,
Yep.
what does everybody else see?
Does everybody else see the circle chart?
Paul says can now correct. Okay.
I just
I
don't see
think you
them.
fixed it now.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No,
On
no,
my screen
that's
it was
okay.
showing. Let's add that to the list to talk to Zoom about.
We got to put that on the software development.
Put that on the list.
Yes.
That's right. I am so sorry, guys. Thanks for letting us know. Please
Yep.
let me know if it gets out of alignment again. But
I will.
okay, so these things again, you're going to recognize these because you've heard us talk about these in some of the earlier classes. We won't go into all of them today. Janet's going to take us into the communication aspect of things, and I'm going to talk more about gravitas, which kind of goes into several of these. But there is a self-assessment in your Dropbox that is there for you. It's a bonus if you want to do it. I highly recommend it. What it will do is allow you to assess yourself in each one of these 6 areas so that you can begin to spot what your strengths are and where your opportunities to improve. With that being said, I just wanted to share this kind of general thought, which is you got to be yourself. Authenticity is one of the most, I think, compelling aspects of who you are as a leader. Being the best version of you that you can be is going to be enticing to people. That's the real essence of authentic leadership, is being your best self. There's another book that was written by Bill George. He's the CEO of Medtronic. You may have heard of this book. It's called Authentic Leadership. There's another one that he wrote called Discover Your True North. Both of those books are great reads to really dive into things like your purpose, your values as a leader, how you align your head and your heart, what you think and how you feel, how to be very relational and to engage people around you. That's really the essence of being authentic. And I think that's just a point that Janet and I always like to make when we talk about executive presence is it's not just all the show. You know, it's not just how you dress or how you speak, it's who you are. And your ability to is sort of exude that and to let the world to see who you are, but to present yourself in a way that is confident and is effective for the audience and the task at hand. And of course, that's the magic. That's where we have to figure out how to do that. So let's dive into it a little bit more closely. So on your screen now, I hope you're seeing just the reference to this study. I'm going to take you into this study for a couple of quick takeaways from it, and then I'm going to turn it over to Janet. But this is a great study. Again, there's an executive summary in the Dropbox. In the Dropbox for you, which we'll dig a little bit more into it. But the core of that I love best about the study is this quality called gravitas. So gravitas, you've heard that phrase before, that word before. I had to dig into it, to be honest, when I first started working with executive presence to find out what it is. Gravitas was one of the Roman virtues. This is the sense of having weight, seriousness, dignity, importance, and substance. So this was kind of the concept, the Roman virtue of gravitas. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense for us to consider why this matters to executive presence, because believe it or not, gravitas is considered the most important element that you can have in the study. It said that 67% of the executive surveyed said that gravitas was the most important quality to have. And so there are a couple of different elements to gravitas. And this is where I want you to, if you would, take a few notes of something that jumps out at you, anything that I mentioned in these different qualities of gravitas, because Janet and I have for you in our breakouts today, we have a couple of scenarios where you're going to get to be the EP expert and you're going to be able to advise our fictitious person of what they're doing wrong. And the answers are going to come from this part of the presentation and what Janet shares. So just jot a couple of notes as I go along. So what are the qualities of gravitas? The first one, and these go in descending order of the ones that got the most support in the survey. The first one is exuding confidence and grace under fire. 79% of the people in this survey said this was the number one most important thing you could do. So what exactly does that mean? Let me give you a little bit of detail. So this means that under pressure, you are not casting blame, but you take responsibility. You're outspoken about your beliefs in a situation. You have confidence under extreme stress. And I think of this as poise, just like being able to kind of hold your stuff together in the moment. Having assurance, and I love this one, this phrase, having the courage of your convictions in the face of extreme pressure, which basically means like I can stand up for what I believe in and I can say it, what needs to be said. That's grace under fire. This is also physical composure, which is just like the lady on the screen here, planting your feet, standing tall, leaning forward, looking people in the eye, not giving into hysteria or anxiety in your body. This also, part of this was that confidence emanates from executives who routinely share credit for success with a broader team. So they're not so selfish just to say, yes, look at me, I did this, I deserve all the glory. They're quick to say thank you, but let me be sure to share the credit with others on the team. And it's also this idea of believing in yourself, having the confidence that you know your material here. You've done your homework. In fact, you might know your material. I call this like knowing your material 2 questions deep. Like if you wanted to ask me one question and then a second one, I could probably answer it on this topic. And it's also this idea of executives who are willing to publicly admit that they don't know something is also exuding confidence and grace under fire. So that's the first element. The second one is acting decisively and showing teeth. So what goes into this? This is the idea of being able that you can render difficult decisions quickly, publicly, and even aggressively if you need to. Being able to do this, to be decisive, telegraphs your command of both a subject and a situation. So I understand what's happening and I know what to do in this particular situation, and I'm willing to make a difficult decision and act quickly and decisively. This is also referred to as having inner toughness, which is the ability to take a stand, to believe in something, to make a difficult decision, even if it's unpopular, and not be swayed from it if you truly believe it's the right thing to do. That doesn't mean you don't modify your decisions as you learn new information, but it's being able to make an unpopular decision and take it when everybody tries to lobby you in the background to change your mind. This is also showing that you mean business. That's kind of the idea of showing teeth and getting the job done. The ability to be proactive, to have good judgment, to make difficult decisions quickly. I think these are really key points, all of which kind of goes into this idea of how well I make decisions and make tough decisions when I have to make them. Number 3, showing integrity and speaking truth to power. This one is so about you. It's about what you believe in, your values, your sort of true north, that inner compass, if you will, that guides you and helps you know what is the right thing for me to do in this particular moment. It's avoiding conflicts of interest when you think there might even be a perception of that. Saying what needs to be said, being transparent with others. So what you see is what you get. I'm not two-faced. I don't present something to you and then turn around and do something different. I'm honest. You don't ever question my honesty. Walking away from something that would otherwise be in my own best interest because I believe it's not the right thing to do. This is so critical for people to truly respect you and to believe in you as a leader, that you can be trusted. That's number 3. Number 4, demonstrating emotional intelligence. Gosh, we could teach a whole class on this. Janet and I love this topic. But this is this idea of knowing and managing your feelings and the feelings of others, recognizing and acting in accordance with those feelings, demonstrating empathy and compassion for others. This is often talked about, EQ is often talked about in being a good listener, being able to walk in somebody else's shoes and to feel the anxiety or the pain that your team might be feeling and walk them through that and walk with them together instead of just sort of discounting it and telling them to toughen up. So that's really the essence of EQ. Number 5 is burnishing reputation. What that means is when you burnish reputation, it means that you don't have to say good things about yourself because everybody else says them for you. So this really begs the question of, do you have champions Do you have mentors? Do you have people that are actually in the room where big decisions are made that could impact you? And those people are championing you, saying, this is the person we need to promote. This is a person that I believe in and want to stand up for. They should win the award or whatever it may be. But that's having good enough reputation, which also means, have I built my networks? Does my LinkedIn profile accurately represent who I am and reflect those types of things? Am I good at being able to talk about and show others strategically what is my unique value that I bring to the organization? That's burnishing reputation. That's number 5. And then number 6 is projecting vision. I love the look on the face of this great leader. I'm sure she is this person that has vision plus charm. And that's the difference. We all probably know people who are visionary leaders, but you don't particularly like them. You don't trust them. They maybe don't have some of the other things on this list. It makes it hard to follow their lead. So do you have the ability to envision the future powerfully? We're going to talk about that next week. To be a future thinking leader, to see where the team needs to go and to develop the path to get there, which is a little bit of what you're doing in your strategic initiative. But as a leader, being able to do that broadly across the enterprise, to lead a company where it needs to go. This is what projecting vision is all about. And Janet, I'm getting ready to turn it over to you. I've got one last slide I want to show the group here. But I love this part of the study. I always like to share this with people because they sort of want to know, like, what am I not supposed to do? So you can see on this slide here, and this is in your download on the executive summary, there were a lot of things that were said in the study that these are the blunders that you could make that would really hurt your executive presence. And I think that's just about as important to know what I should not be doing, which is obviously anything associated with sexual impropriety, unethical behavior, excess of any kind. I thought that was kind of an interesting comment. Vacillates too much, which of course is the opposite of being decisive, right? Too wishy-washy, can't make a decision, second guesses themselves all the time. You know, that's a no-no. Having an inflated opinion of yourself, which is an interesting, conversation of, do I have enough self-worth and self-value and self-awareness about what I'm good at, but I'm not self-centered. You see the difference? I'm not all about myself. I do understand what I bring to the table, and I'm willing and able to share that, but I don't make it all about me is really the key there. Does not give the impression of having deep expertise, which kind of begs the question, what do you know better than anybody else? Are you really a thought leader in your industry? Do your peers within your organization see you as somebody who really knows their stuff about something, whatever it may be? That's an important goal for you to have. I want to be seen as having deep expertise. And then lacks impact, because the point there is you could be super busy doing lots of things, but if those things don't matter to the larger goals of the organization, you will be seen as lacking impact. So you want what you do to really matter to the driving forces and goals of the organization. That's how you can demonstrate gravitas, which of course ladders up to executive presence. So with that, Janet, I'm going to stop and turn it over to you, because she has got some great stuff to share that will go a little bit more specifically into how we bring some of these things to life, particularly in how we communicate and present ourselves to the world.
Right. Thanks, Elise. All right. That was an awesome warm up. All right. So here's kind of where we are. Talked all about the blunders. Now we're going to get a little more, and I think the communication, possibly a little more technical, which I think is important as well. I am an executive producer for an event called TEDx Detroit. I have been on the TED stage and given a TED talk myself. It is extremely stressful, I can tell you, and I have seen incredible executives crumble under the pressure of going to give a huge speech like that. It doesn't mean that this is kind of like, remember last week we talked about kind of crawl, walk, run. Depending upon where you are in your career, it doesn't mean that you have to be an advanced senior executive to give a TED Talk. In fact, many of the people who grace our stage are not huge executives. And I just want to say that you know, depending on where you are, some of you may say, oh, I could totally see myself someday giving a TED talk. Some of you say, there's no way I will ever give a TED talk. Either one is okay. I think that, you know, what matters is that you project that confidence through your communication. So sometimes, yes, that is a formal presentation like a TED talk, or perhaps, you know, your company has a huge annual meeting where thousands of people are logging in, or maybe, and maybe someday again, actually present for a big conference. But it also happens in one-on-one situations and in small group discussions. And sometimes you could argue even more so. So maybe just a quick chat in a quick number in the chat box. If you were to think about how many people are you typically presenting to? Is it, you know, 10 possibly in a conference room, or via a Zoom call? Are you presenting to, you know, hundreds at a time? I'm just kind of curious to see kind of where the class is at. Or is it primarily in these more one-on-one smaller group discussions? Any of this communication that Elise and I are giving you today is relevant for all three. And so hopefully I don't exclude anyone, but I would be curious to know, what is your normal, in a normal month, you know, if you were to think about all the presenting that you would do, what's a typical audience size? Is it 8 to 10 people, etc.? Kind of getting online or following up with the audience piece of things, it really is about the audience. And so I think this is sometimes where executives can trip up, because what happens is we place this pressure on ourselves to be great. And we sometimes psych ourselves out and say, oh my gosh, this is such an important presentation. I've got to get this presentation right. There's a lot on the line for this presentation. And what happens is we escalate the importance. And then, you know, that's when a lot of the nerves kick in, because now you've told yourself how important it is leading up to it. And I would argue, yes, you can tell yourself that it's an important presentation. But, you know, when you say things like, this is a make or break career defining moment for me, you're escalating that presentation sometimes to a standard in your mind that you may or may not ever be able to meet. So I would really recommend you try to release that pressure and say, yes, this is an important presentation. You're kind of affirming with yourself, I have all the skills I need to make this great, and kind of replacing that thought. If you give your audience, you know, what they need and what they came to that meeting for with you, the rest is going to follow. And so it's really thinking about, what does this specific group need to know about this topic, and then kind of starting and building from there. Doesn't really matter what the size is of that audience. So this kind of goes without saying, but I have to say it, is preparation in advance. And I think what happens, particularly at that manager layer in an organization, where we get kind of used to presenting so much that oftentimes we say, oh, I don't need to prepare. But oftentimes an executive really did need to prepare, because that communication just went sideways for a number of reasons. And so that might just be, even particularly in the Zoom world, if your meetings are stacked. If you look at your calendar today and you had a meeting at 9 and another one at 10 and another one at 11 with no breaks in between, and you're presenting, that is not good. I would really recommend you try as best as you can to give yourself 15 minutes to reset when you actually are presenting, whether it's in Zoom or in person, to just kind of calm yourself, make sure you're in the right frame of mind to deliver that message, and, you know, kind of feel like you're gaining some control back and not just, you know, kind of succumbing to your calendar. You know, as the more senior you go, and I come from a public relations and marketing background myself, where I have been totally in charge of my executive's presentation. Believe it or not, yes, I did do some media touring with Bill Gates when he gave presentations throughout Michigan with local nonprofits. And, you know, at some point he took the presentation and said, I need to own this now, you know, let's move this. It isn't all just about, you know, the team that is building. You know, if you gave it over to marketing, yes, they would probably still want to be involved to make sure the brand message and all of those things about the product or whatever it is you're presenting are still in line. But at some point you need to own that content and own the presentation so that you can feel good about what you're presenting. So just be careful not to turn over too much of the power and the control in the presentation. This is like the handiest, and I'm holding up my cell phone here, the handiest device that we have been given for public speaking. It is a simple cell phone. And so for TEDx Detroit, when I'm starting to prep executives, this is like, we haven't even met in person. I'm asking them, send me a high level, even if you're just sitting at your desk, of your talk. Like, what is it? What's the message? What do you want to get across? You'd be very surprised if you can record yourself and get to a level of comfort. It makes the presenting that much easier, because this is kind of an audience in and of itself. I get it, you're not in front of people, but it really does help to get that playback and to practice giving your talk, your presentation, and recording that via cell phone. I mean, this is a simple little beanbag holder that I use on my desktop. I put this on my desktop, and I will record myself. I have not done it for this class, but even for this class, I have recorded some of my segments just to make sure that I'm as prepared as I can be. And then I know that we all know this, but sometimes we do forget to always have a backup plan. So if you have, if you really are liking to use a remote clicker to advance your slides, you know, they're about 30 bucks each, pack two. If you think that your computer may have a unique plug, you know, VGA or whatever that is, you know, in order to be viewed, bring your backup for that. Bring your presentation on a thumb drive. I know this seems so obvious, but it can really rock your world before you come on that stage if there's technical difficulties. So try to remove all of that from the equation, particularly if you have a tendency to get nervous before you present, which is completely normal. And for many of us, understandable that we would be nervous, right? When you're presenting in front of a group of hundreds, if not sometimes thousands, if it's going to be recorded and watched over and over again. You already have enough pressure. So remove some of those variables that you can control. Lisa mentioned this in the beginning of her slides, and I think this is such a good reminder. One of the top reasons why executives are fearful of public speaking, particularly more like what you're seeing here, a small group, maybe it's a small board meeting or boardroom of 10 or 12 people, and it's, you know, the fear and the anxiety that comes up of being asked questions when you may or may not know the answers. And so what happens is like what Elise referred to, like the 2 layers deep. So they would say, you've presented some data that maybe you didn't even generate. It was generated by someone on your team, but it's part of the presentation, and you're presenting, you know, 81% of all of our employees think our 401k is, you know, not meeting their expectations. I'm making that up. And then if someone were to say, okay, well, can you tell me when was the survey taken? And then maybe you know, or maybe you don't know, or, you know, it's the fears sometimes. So if you could think about knowing that, so when was the survey taken? So you would say, well, it was taken August 31st. Oh, and do you know, was that the entire employee base, or was that just this acquisition that we did? And then you'll be able to answer that. Beyond that, you don't have to go much further, because then I'm going to give you some techniques on how you can, I don't want to say get out of answering the question, but I'm going to say it. Get out of answering the question, or crowdsource that. One of the first things you can do, and I love to do this in a group. So if you have a core group of people that you work with, bring them into a conference room, show them your content, and say, hey guys, let's do a quick brainstorm. What are the top 10 questions I'm going to get from the audience based on this presentation, or based on this, you know, whatever announcement or whatever it is that you're presenting? You'd be surprised. It's really easy to come up with those 10 questions, particularly if you kind of crowdsource and bring in a team of people to help you do that. Rephrasing negative questions. So in media training, back again in my public relations days, this was something that I would coach, and I still do when I do media training for executives. So the question would be something like, because Tim's team has shown, you know, incompetence over the past year, what is your, you know, sense of security that this will get done? And then if I were to say, oh, well, of course I think it will get done because of X, Y, and Z, I haven't negated the premise of that question about Tim's incompetent team, right? So you know, you really want to be able to kind of rephrase and say, and not say this is not about Tim's incompetent team. You would want to say, every team at this company is competent. And in fact, even more so for A, B, and C. So you're kind of negating that premise. And reporters are really good at this. They bury the negative part all the time. And it's almost a way to trick you into agreeing. I don't think that people in a business sense are trying to trick you per se, because that's not their job to get a salacious headline. But you need to be on the alert or on the lookout for that. Because this strategy has never worked in the last 5 years we've tried it. What makes today different? And then, you what would be a way, think about how you might rephrase that so that it is not saying, repeating it in the negative, right? Another great technique, I use this all the time, and I say, wow, Elise, that's a great question. Does anybody have any ideas for Elise on that question? And then people, I know the answer. So it's like, the answer. You're kind of coming across like, yeah, I know this answer, but I'm just asking all of you if you know the answer, right? So it gives you a minute to kind of process the question, to think about the question, and maybe to open it up. If this is kind of not a last resort, but it's one of the last resorts that I like to use with senior people, particularly if you're presenting to very senior people. But that can be a way to stall or buy time so that you can process the question. So another really great technique is for you to ask the questions, right? So you would say, well, what does everyone here think about our 401k program here at the company? And then everyone would be, oh, I think this, or, oh, wow, I didn't even know that this was an option for the 401k. So you're kind of like checking to make sure that people are with you. And it's also a way to get audience participation and action kind of back and forth to kind of keep the presentation lively and moving along. It can also help to fill like a long pause. If you're, struggling to change topics or shift gears in the presentation, it can also be a really good technique to just turn around and ask a question. So remember when I said to brainstorm the list of 10 questions that you might be asked? You could also use possibly, not all the time, but possibly some of those questions to turn them on the audience when you need to buy some time, take a drink of water, or just simply rest if it's a long presentation. It also helps you kind of get a feel for the mood in the room. You don't want to overuse this. Anybody here from Vegas, or you don't want to, or where you've been in those presentations? Show of hands. You can use it once, maybe twice, but I wouldn't want this to be overused because it can be frustrating for people in the room. And then this is like the best tool. If you are afraid to get asked a question that you are not going to know the answer, you can always frame it in a way, sometimes, not always, to say, wow, Elise, that is a great question. It is such a meaty topic. I think what we should do is put that in the parking lot and schedule another meeting or do something with that parking lot item, right? So again, it's a way to buy time. It's a way to validate the question, the person who's asking the question, by not saying, well, that's a stupid question. That's way off topic. It's another technique, because the fear of not knowing the answer is one of the biggest fears for people who are presenting publicly. So we're going to take a quick, if everybody can turn on their video for just a second, you're all going to be mad at me. I want to just practice a little bit of we're going to stand up. And we're going to try some power poses. So if you come backstage to TEDx Detroit, you will see us all doing this. So everybody stand up. Come on. We can do it. Reagan, I see you sitting. Ganesh. Okay, good. I'm satisfied with the stand up. Okay, so here's the first pose. I'm going to come back to it. The first one is arms down. This is just power pose. This is a standard power pose. Sometimes you can practice if you're like before the talk, you could put both palms down on the conference room table before you. That's a really good way to kind of take up space and build up your energy. Putting your hands out to your sides like this is definitely like taking up space, right? Just really stretching it out, take up space. This is the Superman pose. Again, feels very powerful. Your feet are firm, not too far apart, not too close together. And then the last one is this like kind of like your hands above your head, which is more I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, but I'm in control, right? That's kind of that pose. And if none of these, like, oh, I don't feel like this is going to work for me, you don't have to do this one right now, but you can just go down into Zen and cross your legs and sit on the floor and get grounded that way. If you try one of these techniques around 15 minutes before you talk, sometimes 5, at the stage, backstage at TEDx Detroit, there's 3,000 people, by the way, that come to TEDx Detroit every year. It's a big, big event. It's interesting to see backstage. I have all the executives and the people that are presenting in a row doing all of these power poses before they go on stage. And some of them are some pretty big executives that are, really using that to, kind of shake up that energy. If you're stressed and you're looking at your notes before and your shoulders are hunched, you need to, physically break up that energy before you take the stage, whatever that stage might be. And, body language really, really telegraphs confidence or fear. And I think that, so yes, standing tall, sitting up, in Zoom land is a little bit different. Using natural gestures. In Zoom, I have this little window to do my gestures, right? If I'm on a huge stage with 3,000 people, my gestures begin to leave my body a little bit further from my body so that the audience can see those gestures. You don't want to overuse gestures, but they can be very, very important for emphasis. And then silence can be very, very powerful when you are giving a speech. And I could tell right away, everyone was like, oh, why has she stopped talking? What's happening, right? Again, it kind of shakes up that energy. And then, of course, smile, relax your face. So again, you'll see people doing those power poses. They're smiling and shaking out their face because some of these techniques have been shown to really, really help people before they go on, so to speak. So the other thing is, and this is kind of, I think this does come back into gravitas. And I know when I was younger in my career, you guys know me well enough to know I'm a talker. I talk a lot. I used to talk even more in my 20s when I was younger in my career. And back in the day, I had a manager say, Janet, wait. And I was like, wait, what does that mean? And say, just ask yourself, why am I talking? Wait, it's a good acronym. And if you have someone that you work with at a meeting and they maybe have a tendency to take over that meeting, this might be a good tip. So if you're going to talk in a meeting, right, you want to make sure you're hitting like one of 4 of these things, that you're offering a unique contribution, meaning if the person to the right of me just said something similar to what I was planning on saying, then maybe don't say that. You could sometimes use it to ask a question, to share an example or a case study. Oh, that's a really great point that Frank made. I have an interesting case study from a program we did last year on that. That might be a way. And then, or also to acknowledge, Frank, wow, that was a great question, or thanks for sharing that. Those can be meaningful contributions. But if your tendency is to take over the meeting, and we all know it, we've all been there. If you're frustrated with the progress and we might want to take over the meeting, another technique is possibly to literally sit on your hands. Put your hands kind of underneath your lap. I'm doing it now, as kind of a reminder. Like, okay, when my hands leave my lap underneath my thighs, I will release them and talk. But when I'm not talking, I put them underneath here. And so this is only for people that are like me and super chatty, and sometimes have a tendency to dominate the room. And that can also be like the opposite of gravitas. We've all been in the room when someone has not chosen their battles. They're fighting every single comment, every single thing. It would be much more impactful if you, like my mother always used to teach me, choose your battles. So if you're in a 1-hour meeting and you've combated, 5, 6, 7 times, that's way too much, right? You want to be able to say, what's the most important? I could pick battles across all 7, but you know what? For this meeting, I'm going to allow myself 2. What are the most important, the most strategic? And again, thinking about, wait, why am I talking? And then the right tool for the job goes without saying. PowerPoint and Keynote is not always the answer. You can see this woman is using, Post-it notes, trying to encourage audience participation in a different way. And I recommend not using technology for the sake of technology. If you can help yourself. I just sat on a really cool team meeting using a technology called Kahoot. Kahoot. And essentially, it was a really cool, fun team bonding event. The manager used Kahoot for people to use their phones to dial in responses and voting. There are all kinds of, particularly now with the pandemic, there's so many options for different kinds of technology to do voting and to let people have a say that may be more quiet, but are just really using the right tool for the job. And then of course storytelling, and some I think executives struggle with when's the time to tell a story and when's the time to give data. And I have a really good framework that I want to share with you, and it's really kind of like looking at the kind of presentation that you would typically give. So on the far left is, I'd call this borderlining like entertainment. It would be sad entertainment if you were delivering a eulogy or maybe a toast at a wedding. And it kind of moves into persuasion a little bit, motivational team building, keynotes. Typically, you would see, TED Talks somewhere in this orange and yellow. So oftentimes, you're just in sales and you're there to persuade, giving project reporting, solve problems, or to make a sale. And then it kind of moves into training, which is pretty much what Elise and I have been doing with all of you for the last few weeks. And then far to the right is really more like a peer review, you're giving a lecture, or you're just briefing a group of executives on these are the facts. And so what does that look like from a framework standpoint of like typically what might you see? So a story, which is, we'll use the eulogy as an example. Susie Cream Cheese was a great lady. Okay, so you're giving this eulogy about Susie, and then you maybe would tell stories about, oh, the time when Susie lost her dog, or how about that time we went swimming down in the creek. These are all stories that kind of build up to that point that Susie Cream Cheese was a great lady. So it's one main point, multiple stories underneath that would color in the lines for people that are presenting. If you're doing a motivational or team building talk, you may have 2 or 3 main points. We are an amazing team in the company. We work together to solve complex problems, and another third leg on that stool. Underneath each of those, you would have the main point. So we work together to solve complex problems, and then you would tell a story. In 2008, none of us were even on this team, but this team is famous because we solved, the team solved this one problem. And you're kind of using that again as stories. And then you might need an evidence point, a quote from the CEO, a piece of data that would support that main point that we work together to solve complex problems. And you can see here where I'm taking this. If it's a true selling, you're trying to convince and persuade someone to purchase, or you're solving a problem, ultimately that may result in a sale. Yes, you'll have 3 main points, a little less on the storytelling, because at this point now people need more evidence to kind of make that decision. So it becomes more about data and less about stories. And then you can see here, even with training. So today I told a little story, very brief, about TEDx Detroit. I could tell stories all day long, but I didn't have time. It was like, this is what I do. I've been doing it 10 years, and that was it. And now I'm making my points about presentation, right? But it's, many main points, only one story about per point, and then you need even more evidence points. And then finally, when you're on the far right, you're just in the room to give a briefing. It's your 5 main points and lots of evidence and data points to support it. This is just a really good framework. I think a lot of times executives get caught up. They attended something about storytelling and they want to tell more stories. It's like, well, what's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish here with this talk or with this presentation? And it always comes back to this. So I put an image of this last slide. It's in the Dropbox, so you can access it and share it if you think it was useful. So we're going to break up into